You know his work the second you see it, right? Those long, almost swan-like necks, the almond-shaped, often totally empty eyes, the faces that look like masks, somehow both serene and really unsettling at the same time. The style of Amedeo Modigliani is, without a doubt, one of the most recognizable in all of modern art. But the story behind the man who created these stunning, elegant portraits, well, it's far, far more turbulent than the art itself.
And this right here is the heart of the mystery. On the left, you see that haunting elegance I'm talking about. It's graceful, elongated, almost from another world. But on the right, that's the artist himself, Amedeo Modigliani. And he looks rugged, intense, almost defiant. So how does this man create that art? That's the paradox we're going to dig into today. And here's the absolute central tragedy of his life. While his paintings now sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, he died at just 35, totally penniless, having sold almost nothing. A genius who, by every measure of the time, died a complete failure. The question is, why? To even begin to understand that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to his childhood as this Italian prodigy, where, you'll see, brilliance and crisis were tangled up from the very moment he was born. So Modigliani was born in Livorno, Italy, back in 1884. He was born into a really sophisticated Sephardic Jewish family. But his timing was, let's just say, a little bit dramatic. His father, who had been a successful businessman, saw his company go bankrupt at the exact moment of Amedeo's birth. And his birth itself, it's the stuff of legend. You see, there was this ancient Italian law that said creditors couldn't seize the bed of a woman who was in childbirth. So, as the bailiffs are knocking on the door, the family just starts piling all their most valuable stuff right on top of his mother's bed. His very first act in this world was basically saving them from total ruin. I mean, talk about a dramatic entrance, right? But that dramatic childhood was also just shadowed by constant serious illness. When he was 11, it was pleurisy. At 14, he got a really severe case of typhoid fever. And then, at only 16 years old, he contracted the one disease that would haunt him for the rest of his life and, ultimately kill him, tuberculosis. And yet, through all of that sickness, his mother saw something special. In her diary, she looked at her 11-year-old son, and she wrote, "What is inside this chrysalis? Perhaps an artist?" She had no idea how right she would turn out to be. So, with his mom's support, he went all in on art. And in 1906, he did what pretty much every ambitious artist of his time did. He packed up and moved to Paris. And this move, it would change him completely, turning him from this respectable Italian student into a figure who would become known as the Prince of Vagabonds. He'd landed right in Montmartre, which was the chaotic beating heart of the avant-garde, and he settled right here, at a place called the Bateau Lavoir. This famous, kind of ramshackle building was basically a commune for penniless artists, and it was where history was being made. His neighbor? A young, totally unknown painter by the name of Pablo Picasso. And this slide really shows you just how fast and shocking his transformation was. On the left is the before, this well-bred Italian gentleman who shows up in Paris. You know, his studio was neat, he was dapper, pretty reserved. On the right, that's the after. And this is just 1 year later. He had crafted this entirely new persona. Wild, drunk, defiant, he became one of the most notorious characters in the whole bohemian scene. But somehow, in the middle of all this chaos, he was forging one of the most unique artistic visions of the entire 20th century. He was soaking up everything around him. Cubism, African art, Renaissance portraits. But his work never belonged to any single movement. It was just purely Modigliani. You know, something a lot of people don't realize is that for 5 really crucial years, from 1909 to 1914, he barely even painted. He was devoted almost entirely to sculpture. He saw himself first and foremost as a sculptor, carving these incredible elongated heads from stone, taking inspiration from ancient and non-Western art. He was eventually forced to give it up, though. The dust from the stone was just aggravating his tuberculosis, and then World War I started, making materials super scarce. He never sold them for any real money. But get this, in 2010, just one of those limestone sculptures, a piece called Tet, sold for this much, over $70 million. So when he was forced to go back to painting, he focused on what he did best, portraits. He basically became the great chronicler of the school of Paris, painting the faces of the artistic revolution that was happening all around him. He painted his friends, his rivals, the giants of the age. Here's his take on Pablo Picasso.
And here, his very close friend and fellow painter, Chaim Soutine. You can really see how he just captures the essence of each person, but he filters their likeness through his own completely unmistakable style.
And here's the Cubist painter, Juan Gris. Modigliani was right in the thick of it all, painting the very people who were literally inventing modern art. And yet, even standing among these giants, his own style remained just utterly his own. So, okay, we've got the artist and the iconic style. But what we're really left with is the legend, the image of the self-destructive genius. And that forces us to deal with a really tough question about the connection between his incredible art and his tragic life.
This is the question that's right at the heart of his myth. Was his genius actually fueled by all the hashish and absinthe he was consuming? It's this romantic idea that has defined him for a century, the notion that all that debauchery was the key that unlocked his creativity.
And this view was popular even when he was alive. Take this critic André Salmon. He wrote that all that debauchery brought an unexpected light that transformed his art. This whole idea that he was actually a lesser artist when he was sober, it became the foundation of his legend. But there is another, and I think far more tragic, explanation. We have to remember his tuberculosis. In early 20th century France, TB wasn't just a disease, it was a death sentence. It was the #1 cause of death, there was no cure, and it was so deeply stigmatized that people who had it were often feared and totally ostracized.
So here's the crucial point. What if the addictions weren't some kind of quest for artistic vision, but really just a desperate attempt to self-medicate? What if he was using alcohol and drugs as palliatives, a way to numb the constant physical pain of his disease and to project an image of vitality when, in reality, he was dying?
And this is his final self-portrait. He painted it in 1919, just a few months before he died of tubercular meningitis. He looks haunted, frail, completely exhausted. The mask of the Prince of Vagabonds has finally slipped, and it reveals the sick man underneath it all.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering question. Modigliani's life and his work are so often used as the poster child for the suffering artist. But did his suffering actually create his genius, or was his genius something that somehow persisted in spite of his suffering? It's the question that makes the man behind those masks so endlessly fascinating.